I think that everything in this entire world that we can see, taste, and touch rises and falls on male leadership. When men show up, everybody wins. And when men don't, when men become takers, when men lack an identity, everybody loses.
You're a man living in the modern world in a time when men and manhood are not what they once were. You live life on your own terms. You're self-sufficient. You think for yourself, and you march to the beat of your own drum. When life knocks you down, you get back up, because in your gut, you know that's what men do. You're a badass and a warrior, and on the days when you forget, we are here to remind you who you really are.
Welcome to Sovereign Man Podcast, where we aim to make men masculine again. I'm your man, Nikki Ballou, and we're here with a very special guest, David Ask. Welcome to the show, Dave.
Hey, what's up, man? I'm so glad to be here. Thank you. That's a pleasure, pleasure and an honor.
Yeah, ditto, man. Ditto. You're a good man, and you've been doing the work of men for quite some time. So why don't you tell us a bit about your backstory insofar as it relates to you being involved in this work of men?
Yeah. So, it's interesting. I think, I'll kind of go way back. So I think, much of my life, I was surrounded by a lot of great men. My dad, grandpa, men who were loyal, hardworking, honest, virtuous, men who loved the Lord and, wanted to provide well for their families, make a difference and so on. And at the same time, I think, like all of us, right, we live in a world that's broken and everybody's kind of got their issues and all that kind of stuff. And as I was, kind of launching into my own life and trying to figure out, who am I and who am I not? And, all those things, I kind of struggled, for quite a while because I think we can all understand, especially in our culture right now, social media and the whole nine yards, I struggled with, comparing myself to other people for so long, while, I kind of lacked, some self-awareness, like, who am I and who did God, make me to be in this world? And so I started to do a bit of, deep dive and heavy lifting in my mid 30s and 40s and so on, and especially in the last 5 or 6 years, maybe 7 years. And it's amazing, the shift that really started to take place in me and how I saw myself, fitting into not only my own skin, my own life, but, into other men's lives. And so I'll make one statement and we can kind of go from there. But you probably would agree, I think that everything in this entire world, that we can see, taste, and touch rises and falls on male leadership. When men lead well, when men show up, with kindness and conviction and clarity, everybody wins. And when men don't, when men become takers, when men lack an identity, when men start to be, the emotional suck on everything and everybody in life, everybody loses. And I think that if we want the world to go in a beautiful, noble place, boy, we just need to start with the men. If men love and lead well, everybody wins.
Well, I happen to agree with you to a point. I frankly think I get nervous when men, especially Christian men, start talking about words like kindness and love. And I'm not saying men shouldn't be kind or shouldn't love, but it almost seems to be a code for emasculated and pardon me for putting it like this, ballless, right? And I think that's a problem. I think it's a huge problem when men don't stand up for their convictions. And frankly, in the Christian world in particular, I see these pastors that come up and say, well, for everything to be great as a man, you got to do X, Y, Z. And then they turn around to the woman and say, all you have to be is the perfect little angel that you are. That's a load of horse crap. There's a load of horse crap. There's a lot of things that modern women are doing really wrong. And they need to be called out for it as strongly as modern men need to be. And I think if you turn this into a situation where all you're doing is dumping on men, that is what's wrong with today's world. And I don't want to see that happen. I don't want to see people go to men, well, you're the problem. Everything's you. You're not leading. You're a schmuck. Get better. That's the whole toxic masculinity, hate-filled crap that's being tossed on the head of men. And I got zero time for that. In fact, I created this to fight against that. Tell you the truth. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. Well, man, there's a lot in there to unpack. So what's the difference between being nice and being kind? Right? There's a big difference.
Let's
You
hear it.
can nice someone all the way to hell, right? Being kind, right, is saying the truth in love, right? It's telling somebody, if they're if they're floundering or they're doing things that are counterproductive or whatever, it's being able to say those things. But I'll be honest, do it in a way where it's actually going to work and not just insult somebody for the sake of being right. So you can be right all day long, but if you don't have the social intelligence or the emotional capital to enter into somebody's world and say, hey bro, hey dude, hey son, hey brother, what you just said and what you did was absolutely counterproductive to what I think you're wanting to be about in this life. And you know what? Guess what? If you want to make a difference, if you want to do these things and head in a better direction and make that right, I'm willing to walk with you. It doesn't mean that we need to, sugarcoat anything, but I do think that there's a way of saying things in this world that land on people in a way where they can hear it. So I think there's a bit of emotional intelligence that needs to accompany the truth so that somebody isn't turned off by a Pharisaical, like even in the Bible, right? The Pharisees, they were right. They said all the right things, but guess what? God chastised them because they were arrogant. I mean, thus the word Pharisaical, right? They wanted the glory and they put everybody under a load of slavery that they couldn't live up to. And I think there's a way for us to enter into someone's life. How about this? Call them out? Sometimes, yes. But how about call them up and do it in a way that invites them into a kingdom that is noble and good and powerful? I think there's a way to do that. It's, I don't know, maybe bold and winsome at the same time.
Well, look, I appreciate what you're saying. It's not about insulting people, but I think a lot of men today need to be treated less with kid gloves and more with truth. And truth is not sugar-coated, is not real truth. I mean, there was a man
I hear you.
that was in our so I run a men's group, as I told you offline when we spoke. There was a man who joined us, and anyways, I'll share this much. He heard me hold a man to account because this man, we have a standard that if you have something to say to a man, you don't type something snarky in the chat. You interrupt and you say it, right? And this man a week ago typed something snarky in the chat. We told him, hey, we don't do that. Don't do that. Say what you have to say. And he did at the time. And then the following week, lo and behold, he typed something snarky in the chat. So as soon as he did that, I stopped the meeting and I read him the riot act, right? And I told him, you were told last week not to do this. Why'd you do it? Right? There was no, I wasn't trying to make him feel good about himself or be kind to him in that moment. I was trying to make him feel some heat that he basically told us he would do something and he broke his word. And that's not on, right? And this one fellow freaked out and left the meeting and was noticed. And I said, hey, what's going on? And he just sent me a note going, I don't want to be embarrassed. I don't want to be treated like a child. I'm like, oh, all right. Well, he's not being treated like a child. He's being treated like a man. He made an agreement and he broke it 2 meetings in a row. I'm not going to let him get away with that because that hurts the standards of the entire group. And I also came out and said, well, this man has certain things in his life he isn't happy with. I'm not going to get into what those are, but they're serious for him. And one of the reasons that those things aren't going well is, well, he'd rather be nice, kind than confrontational, right? And he needed to confront. What he had to say was valid and legitimate, and he needed to confront a particular individual. He just didn't want to do it. He just didn't want to do it. Didn't want to just write a note and back off. And that's why he's failing in those other areas of his life, because he's not willing to confront the things that need confronting in his life. And we've had a long conversation with this man about this, long, like in service of him improving his life, improving himself.
Sure.
So anyways, this fellow basically said to me that he thinks I'm an asshole. And I said, that may be true. That's not for me to say. But this coming from love, this is what love looks like. Love doesn't look like, his mama. I'm not his mama. I'm a man in his life. I'm not here to make him feel good about his screw-ups. I'm here to point his screw-ups up to him, and I'm here to make sure that he's awake enough to those screw-ups that he's going to do something about it. And next week, when he has something to say, he won't put a snarky note in the chat. He'll actually interrupt and say it to the man like a man and say, hey, that thing you just did here, I got a problem with it. Here's why, right? Because that's what a men's group should be. It's a place where you can have an honest conversation with another man in service of that man having his life get better. I just don't like the idea of us going, well, he might be offended, he might be insulted, he might be like, I'm going to treat him like he's an adult man. And up until 1960, an adult man, you could just go to him and say, hey, you screwed up over there. And he wouldn't lose his crap. He wouldn't lose his bearings and go, oh my God, you're mean, you're nasty. They call that feminized behavior, right? Because a man should be challengeable. In fact, being challenged is, in my opinion, the best thing for a man. It's what makes him grow. If I'm not challenged, left to my own devices, I'm going to sit in front of the television set, watch reruns of Miami Vice and eat bonbons, brother. You know what I'm saying? So anyways, that's just my thinking about this.
Yeah. I think, and I think I think you're right. I mean, we're as iron sharpens iron, right? As one man sharpens another. So I don't think there's any question that we need to be challenging each other and so on. But I do think that there are times when there's you come in with an axe or a sledgehammer, and there's times when you just ask. Sometimes asking questions can be a whole lot more strategic to help somebody come to their own self-awareness than I mean, so I think it really depends on the situation and the person and reading the room. But I think to your point,
I agree. Reading the room is very important. If there's a man who, for example, has been beaten up by life, if you go hammering him, that's not going to help him any. But at the same time, if there's a man who's trying to get away with something again and again and again, I don't think you do him any favors by letting him get away with it. That's all.
Yeah. No, I hear what you're saying. I think there's you gotta. It just depends on the situation how you handle that. I think calling somebody to account, especially when they signed up for it, right? Especially if they're in a group like yours and they say, I want to be here to grow and to be challenged and to, kind of chip away at some of the edges that aren't serving me well or serving others well, for that matter. That's probably a good place to do that.
100%, 100%, man. So you run a group yourself, right? You've been running a group for 7 years, you said? 8 years?
Yeah, it's just over 7 years. So I joined actually a group called ISI, Iron Sharpens Iron Mastermind, 7 years ago. A guy named Aaron Walker started it. And about a year into the group, the guy that was facilitating, so there's 100 people in ISI. You got groups of between 6 and 10 people, and there's a facilitator for each group. And about a year in, I was asked to facilitate the group that I was in, and which honestly felt like a bit of a stretch. So it's funny. You and I, the way God wired us uniquely, very different. I mean, I would say that you're more of an axe or sledgehammer type of a personality. There's no question about it. And I think I'm not, and I'm not saying that I'm a marshmallow either. I'm happy to wield a sword, as it were, when I need to. But God wired us much differently. I'm much more of an encourager. I'm much more of a someone who sees those places in other people where they're struggling. Or how about this? See places in other people that they haven't identified, like the word identity, the things that are great in them. Mm-hmm. That top 10% that God put in someone that is beautiful and courageous and powerful and creative. For me, I feel like my calling in this life is to name those places in other people and call them up and validate those things, and to help other people learn how to do that. And but so it was interesting when I was asked to be the facilitator of that group. I was honored, and then I struggled, with some imposter syndrome, and we had some guys in that group. They're doctor and a lawyer and like just some pretty high octane people and personalities. But the cool thing about that is I had a year to get to know these guys, and we jumped into the deep end of the pool very quickly. Not only sharing, with one another, our wins, the things that were, aspirations and goals and things like that, but the places in our lives where we struggled, the places that we'd fallen down, and it was so. I'll put it this way: it was so transformational to have a group of men that I respected validate the fact that, yes, David, we want you to be the next leader of this group, and it changed something in me. It helped me to believe, that what I brought to this world was good, was powerful, was, transformational for people. And
yes,
and it I felt like in a lot of ways I unhitched the plow that I was dragging around, and all these question marks, right? It's funny, by the way, my last name is ASK, ask. And it's pronounced Osk. Oddly enough, there's a town in Norway named Osk. That's my heritage. But when I think about this idea that for me personally, it's kind of ironic that my last name is Ask. I had a lot of questions and a lot of question marks inside of my head and my heart, and it was so wonderful to have a group of men that I admired, that I respected, that came alongside me and started to draw out and draw forth and name and validate those things that I really, wanted to believe about myself. And, we need that. We need other people in our lives that, that see our greatest attributes and hold up a mirror and let us know they're good, they're great. So, yeah, I realized at that point that, focusing on, kind of to your calling, right, to focus on men in a unique way, with hopefully with a unique language, right, my own, that would, help me to, cause them to flourish in life and to rise up.
So you were in a group, you were asked to lead and facilitate. Does that mean you are now officially part of the delivery team and no longer a client? What does that all mean in that space?
Well, yeah. So, it's interesting. Yeah. So I'm part of the, the Iron Sharpens Iron facilitator leadership team, whatever. We do a monthly call with Aaron Walker and a guy named Derek Champagne, who's also kind of a co-leader with Aaron. And what's neat is I'm at the same time, I'm also, a member of that same group. So here's something that I think is fascinating. And I borrowed this language from someone else, and I forget who said it, but they said, when you're in a mastermind group, the table is round, right? There's no head of the table. I'm not a guru. There's no such thing as a guru.
Yes.
In fact, have you ever heard that phrase, never meet your heroes?
Yes,
right? Because they're going to let you down.
They sure are.
And there are no heroes, right? We all are and we all aren't. We're on any given day, we get up with a mixed bag of contradictions and, misgivings, and we fall down, we get up and all that kind of stuff. But what I love about a mastermind group in its truest sense is that, we're sitting at a round table, and every single one of us, is really called to look at each other and, offer what we have that day, and lead with lead justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly. And so I'm grateful that I'm surrounded by men that, I can do that with.
That's amazing, man. That's amazing. Men need to be with other men. I've interviewed the great Ryan Mickler on my podcast, and he runs the Order of Man, which has 1,100 members.
Wow.
Yeah. And I've also interviewed the great Larry Hagner of the Dad Edge movement. They have over 650 members. And
oh, that's awesome. Wow.
I'll tell you this, and I said this to them, if they each had 10,000 members and there were 10,000 men like them that each had 10,000 members, it wouldn't be enough.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be enough.
Yeah.
And I did a program called the Sterling Men's Weekend. And Justin Sterling, the man who led it, passed away, although there's some people that are carrying on his work. And David, I highly encourage you to go do the program at some point with one of the folks that runs it. It's in April and May. There's a West Coast and then an East Coast one happening. And Justin Sterling said in one of the rooms I was in with him one day, you know you've arrived when you can look another man in the eye, see his pain, and not walk away. You know, there are so many men in deep, deep pain right now.
Yeah.
Rate of suicide for men is over 6 times that of women.
Yeah.
And a big reason is because men hold it all in until they can't anymore, and then they end it all. And they usually don't have anybody to talk to. 10 years ago, the great Bill O'Reilly on his program, The O'Reilly Factor, said, the average man in America has one friend. That was 10 years ago. Today, the average man in America has under a half a friend, which means effectively the average man in America doesn't have one friend. One friend. Someone they can call when the crap hits the fan, someone they can call to run things by. And I really want to see more and more men be involved in this type of work.
Yeah.
Really,
man,
it's an
epidemic, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the long and the short of it from my point of view.
Yeah.
You know, I want to bring more and more men to our work. I want to see you bring more and more men to your work. And I know that you're putting a program together with a friend of yours. And I think it's I think it's noble work that you're doing, David. Really is.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited. I feel like there's actually a book I read 10 years ago called "Building the Bridge as You Walk on It," and like you said, I think if you had a man who had 10,000 people in his tribe and those 10,000 had 10,000, it's not nearly enough, right? It's just a drop in the bucket.
It is.
And what I think is fascinating is that we all have I guess how about this? A tribe, as it were, that's kind of drawn to us, right? The people that we gel with, right? And so I feel like I'm, in a way, building the bridge as I'm walking on it. Well, I totally am. And I'm excited to see what happens. I don't know if I necessarily want to run a mastermind, in the traditional sense like that, but I truly, long to have a unique impact. And it's interesting. You and I both like quotes. So my favorite quote, which I think really sums up my mission in life, is you probably heard me say this last time we talked, is by Benjamin Disraeli. And he said the greatest good you can do for another is not to share with him your riches, but to reveal to him his own. And what I think is really fascinating is that we've got a unique fingerprint, right? We got a unique retina. We've got, how about this, a DNA that cannot be replicated, right? It's like, so I feel like God is just screaming to us that your uniqueness matters. And when we start to identify, how you and I are different and how I'm different from my son and everybody else, and we start to, act in accordance, with our, authentic nature, right? The word authenticity, right, comes from the word author. When we start to identify those things that God wrote in us and we start acting in alignment with those things, there are some clues, right? Our energy rises, right? I mean, we tend to feel like, a sense of, resilience, courage, even kind of a supernatural, sustainment when we start acting in alignment with, with who we are and what we care about on a very unique level. And I think something that, is really unique to me is just this idea of helping people build some self-awareness. Like, hey, dude, how are you different from your dad and your brother? And yes, you are a man, of course. And a man should do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly. I think the Hebrew root word for man means one who turns chaos into order.
Yes.
So yes, we have a blanket of masculinity that every man needs to be about.
Yes.
But then it even gets better, right? There's something so powerful and unique that's been written into your DNA. And when you start acting inside of that authenticity, guess what? You feel a sense of authority in your life because you're not trying to act like Joe Rogan or, whoever you admire. You start acting in alignment with your own nature. And all of a sudden, you start to feel genuine and free and resilient, and the clues, as it were, the energy starts to rise up, and you start to feel like yourself. And it's exciting for me personally to be a part of that particular work.
Amen, brother. Amen. As men, we need other men, but at the end of the day, we got to walk our own path.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's and to your point, by the way, that when you mentioned that most men have less than one friend, right?
Less than half a friend, brother. That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's an absolute pandemic, and of course, even Scripture talks so much about, on a very basic level, pity the one who doesn't have a friend. That when he stumbles, there's no one to pick him up.
Nobody.
And everything from iron sharpening iron to, it's we have to have people around us. To walk with. We were made, for a relationship. In fact, this is getting a little bit deep in the weeds, but I heard somebody say the other day that you in life you have relationships and you have junk. And his whole point is that we were made for relationships, and everything else is just a context, to experience relationship in. And I honestly, I believe that. When you think about just God, who's God and who made everything? Well, he is relationship. Before the foundation of time, Father, Son, and Spirit existed. Well, there's a clue. So to your point, right? We have to have people in our lives, to walk life with. We cannot understand ourselves on this context that we experience unless we're walking with other people closely.
Amen. Amen. The truth of the matter is that this organization that I built, it stands on the shoulders of some giants. One of them is Justin Sterling, who passed away in March. And there's a little saying which we close out a lot of our meetings with, and it goes something like this: because everything that transpires in my life reveals something about me as a man, me in relationship, and me as a leader, if only I pay attention.
Yeah, that's some insight right there.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And we do the majority of our meetings on Zoom. We do a couple of kickoff meetings a year that are longer, and they're in person. If you want to come in person, we'll give a Zoom option for those. And then we do these, optional overnights where a group of us go rent a space, an Airbnb, or maybe even go camping. And we hang out together as a group of men in an overnight, and there's a man in charge and gets all the food together, make sure that, when we're done with the place, we leave it better than we found it, and man in charge of the content. But those overnights, they are amazing. It's an opportunity to just instantly bond with a group of men. You become close like brothers. And masculine only space is what's missing today from men. It's what they don't have. Yeah. And it's good to have it on Zoom, but you need some in-person masculine only experiences with other men. It's a great thing to be a father. It's a great thing to be a husband and a provider. But you need your men. You just need your men. I think a man that doesn't have his men is in deep trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't it neat how we're so wired to have a tribe, right? I mean, whether it's, team sports or, men are so drawn to even movies where, you've got at least, whether it's Frodo and, I'm forgetting all the Samwise, and I mean, it's Batman and Robin, there's always, a kind of a second, there's always, if you have a front man, there's always a second man who he ends up usually giving the credit to. There's the dynamic duo exists, for all time. And I love that. I think we're just so wired to need and desire that.
Yeah, it's beautiful. David, man, it's been fun having you on, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah. Well, thanks. I'm it's funny when you and I met, whatever, a couple months ago now, probably, I was really taken aback by, I'll just put it this way, by your horsepower. Like you've got, there's something about your presence that it's just powerful. And I can see that, there's like a nuclear reactor in some people that is just hotter than others. And it's great to see you making a dent and a difference in lives in such a powerful and unique way. So I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
It's been a great conversation. I learned a lot. Appreciate it, man.
Thank you for listening to the Sovereign Man podcast. If you're ready to take charge of your life and become the man you've always wanted to be, we invite you to join the movement at sovereignman.ca.